I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome to our second evening of budget presentation. Before we start, there's a few counselors that would like to give comment before the budget session starts. So I'm going to start with Councilor Goff, and we can work our way down.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last council meeting, the first budget meeting with the Board of Education, we had a somewhat difficult meeting, and then we had a follow-up meeting. But unfortunately, we had a final outburst which accused the council of having secret meetings and so forth. And I just want to comment, there have been emails going back and forth about this, and I think it's important for people to recognize that that's not true, that all of the meetings, the council has been apprised of the situation with the Board of Education pretty much from the beginning, when we went in and talked to them. And I just find it very disconcerting that we would be accused of behavior like that. Thank you.
Councilor Councilor DiLorenzo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really don't have too much to say. I just want to say, though, that we have a long way to go. Budget has just started. We have many more meetings and a lot of deliberations and a lot of things to get through. So I just hope that everyone could be respectful of one another, and that we could agree to disagree at times if necessary, but that we all stay through the meetings and not have incidents of people leaving the meetings. Let's try to work together across the aisle because we have to. So let's agree to do that, because it's all in the best interest of our town. It's not my own personal interest, it's the interest of the citizens of Bloomfield, and I really hope that we could go above. Let's step above and look out for the citizens and try to keep some of the personal and other matters offline and have them in discussions outside of the public forum if it comes to that. So, thank you.
Councilor Mann.
Well, I wasn't prepared to speak tonight, but I want to follow up. I thought the comments at the end of the meeting were quite out of line. I don't see any reason why the leadership of this council can't meet with the leadership of the Board of Education to try and stave off a problem before it becomes public. I think that's exactly what they're supposed to do. And I find that the comments made were quite out of line, and let's get back on track. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I would say is, I guess it's the culture we live in these days. I think everyone is taking a cue from D.C. Just put things out there and whatever sticks will stick. But the reality is the council leadership of this council met with the school board, and rightfully so, to discuss the budget beforehand, the items, to see if they could make adjustments. So I didn't see anything secretive about that. The meeting, the mayor sent out an email to the full council, just giving them a brief of what went on. So I think we need to leave all the showboating off stage and work in the best interest of the town, and don't worry about the little blow-ups, because we have an important job to do. Because whether or not we care about this budget, I think it's important to do the hard work and spend time to collaborate with your colleagues and not try to throw things out there just so you can feel good. Thank you.
So I gave the four counselors that actually stayed to the end of the meeting an opportunity to make comments, because it's not a regular meeting, so comments weren't necessary, but comments were made. So I gave the four counselors that actually stayed to the end of the meeting an opportunity to make comments. So with that, we're going to go into budget.
You
but I
don't
also-
want, you don't want
I would
anybody else to
also-
make comment?
No, I don't.
Well, that's
I would
wonderful.
also-
Thank you.
I would also like to state that because we still have issues to work out with the Board of Ed, that it's possible that we will be having more meetings with the Board of Ed to try to get this worked out for the best interest of our students and the town. At this time, I'm going to turn over to our town manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have our senior staff here today to go through what is on our agenda, which is essentially the town-wide revenues and expenditures. Our Director of Finance, Carrie Rowley, will lead that discussion, and she will be followed by a more detailed presentation on our capital improvement program by Nancy Haynes, who manages that in really a lot of detail throughout the year as we go forward and has more of a detailed knowledge of some of these particular programs. So at this point in time, I would call on Carrie Rowley to go over our detailed revenues and expenditures.
All right, good evening. My name's Carrie Rowley. I'm the Director of Finance, for those that don't know me, and I'd like to take a minute to introduce my new deputy, Sharon Gentle-Harris. She's been with us through January. Yeah. She's been with us through since the beginning of January, and she was definitely a very big help in doing the slides, and I don't know what I would have done without her here. So.
Come up and just introduce herself?
Sure, yeah. Sharon, do you want to?
Don't trip.
Yeah.
No workers' comp.
Good evening, everyone. I am Sharon Gentles-Harris, and it's been a pleasure to start working for the town of Bloomfield, the town that I live in. It's a transition for me coming from an insurance industry, but I look forward to learning a lot and also contributing in every way that I can to make Bloomfield the best town there is. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the first actual slide of the presentation. So this is the first presentation that has essentially the template that the Finance Committee kind of put together and trying to streamline presentations. So this is a 4-year comparative review. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time. I passed out this actual first page. I just had to swap headings. You guys all, okay. So tax and assessment, you can see in fiscal year 2017, it was $74 million, and the request this year is $85 million, and that's the mill rate's basically set when you look at all the townwide expenditures and you subtract out all other revenue. That's what essentially we're left with, what we need to collect in taxes. So, you know, I think you'll see the growth in the tax revenue over the years, and I think that, you know, of course, that's partly attributed to the increase in the mill rate, but we also had an increase in the grand list for the past 3 years now. So that's definitely helped our growth in revenue. So moving on to the state property, oh no, sorry, just moving on to the next thing. Back to the old slide. The state property tax relief, as you can see, it started in fiscal year 2017 at $997,000, now we're at $580,000. That mainly is we received a one-time grant in fiscal year 2017 for about $438,000 that we have not since received, and also the Mashantucket Pequot grant. In fiscal year 2017-18, it was about $150,000. It's now, because of the state cuts, it's $94,000. State education grants, the ECS remains the same from our actual received in fiscal year 19. Because of a timing difference, it was budgeted a little bit higher than what we're actually receiving in 19. So that's why there's an actual variance in the budget of $78,000. Our other state and federal grants, We received a grant in fiscal year 17 for about $90,000 that we have not received since, but other than that, it's been pretty flat line. Use of assets, you can see that it was fairly high in 2018. That was because we were owed some back rent for our towers that we collected, over $100,000 that's since been made up. It was a one-time revenue source. Miscellaneous receipts in 2018, $258,000, but we're not projecting that much in the current years. The main increase for that is we received a payment from MIRA for a payback. It was a one-time thing for about $75,000. License and permits, you'll see in fiscal year 17 we had a great year, and it's been slowing down gradually over the years, so I have reduced the building permits about $150,000 to reflect that. Fees and service charges mainly consist of like our real estate conveyance, our ambulance service, slightly decreased about $78,000, and that's mainly because I decreased the ambulance revenue and the real estate conveyance slightly. So now we can move on to the next slide.
Carrie, just a quick second.
Yep.
Could you just please elaborate a little bit more on the $400,000 that you said in grants that we haven't applied for? Why?
We didn't apply. No, it wasn't that we didn't apply for it. It was a state payment that we have since not received.
Okay.
But just because of the restructuring of the state.
Okay.
It didn't have anything to do with what the town applied for.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, this next slide is just an informative slide, just kind of letting you know about our grand list. It increased $41.3 million from fiscal year 19 to the current fiscal year 2020 proposed. It equates to about $1.55 million, but that's using the mill rate that we currently have. That would, of course, change as we, once an actual mill rate is set.
I don't think we had that sheet.
Yeah, it's under the revenue summary.
Okay.
Too many pages.
Okay.
So it's on the first flap when you open up the book, and it should be under the revenue summary. Yeah, I put got it. Okay. So real estate increased about $15.9 million due to construction at Seabury, completion of Trader Joe's, industrial additions at 100 Phoenix Crossing and Home Goods, and some real estate additions as well. Personal property increased $19.2 million. That's mainly because of Trader Joe's reporting for the first time this year. Niagara and Home Goods also had a large increase. In our motor vehicle, we received new valuation software, and we added about 400 vehicles, so that increased our grand list, $6.2 million. We have 4 remaining abatements on the list, ending from 2020 to about 2023. On to the next. Okay, so the current levy revenue, we kind of already discussed that, is an increase of $6.4 million, and that's only because the current budgeted expenditures increased so much, and it is set based on your expenditures less all other revenue is the revenue that you need to receive by taxes. The interest and liens and supplemental motor vehicle remain the same as prior year. Prior year collections actually decreased $50,000 based on the 5-year average. So there is quite a variation in from 2013 to 2018, but right now we've only collected about $607,000. So I'm not sure we're actually going to meet our revenue for this current year at $750,000. So I conservatively budgeted only $700,000. To the next slide. Okay, for the state revenue overview, our education cost share grant, it's a difference of $78,000, but that's only because the budgeted amount varied from our actual received for this year. We are projected to receive $5.4 million in fiscal year 19 and $5.4 million in fiscal year 2020. There was an increase in the Alliance portion of $167,000. Fiscal year 18, the Board of Ed is receiving $815,000, and in 2020, they will be receiving $982,000.
Actually, Carrie?
Yeah.
Can I just ask one question
Sure.
on that? That Alliance portion, we are no longer an Alliance district.
Right.
So when is the last year we will be receiving that?
So fiscal year 2020 is year 2, so we have one more year. Yep.
They're now called promise districts.
The pilot revenue only increased slightly, about $3,000. Our stabilization grant increased about $10,000.
Excuse me, Carrie?
Yeah.
Can I, just a quick question.
Yep.
The correct schools, we have about several of them in our town. Do they qualify under pilot?
I'm not sure.
Have we
I can
filed
find
for it?
that out. Yep.
They're under.
So it should qualify as a metropolitan solution under pilot, I would think, no? Not that they're... Yeah.
It's all state.
Yep.
Our town aid road grant is the same as prior year. Municipal capital grant, we're still fortunate enough to receive that at $1.7 million. Our LoSiP did decrease about $20,000, but we're still receiving $125,200. Okay, some just other highlights in our other revenues. Our decrease in building permit by $150,000. You know, in 2013, we were only receiving about $331,000. Our peak at 2016, we were receiving $2.5 million. I think you will see that the trend has slowed down a little bit. Therefore, that's why I decreased our revenue for 2020, $150,000. I did increase our extra duty revenue from $150,000 to $175,000 based on our activity in that fund. We take it in a separate fund, Fund 24, where all the expenses are, and we do a one-time transfer to cover the cost of the officers, their benefits, all the costs of the cars, the fringe benefits. So I increased that $25,000. The increase, I increased the interest on investment from $130,000 to $150,000. We are receiving really good interest rates right now, anywhere from 2% to 2.5%. So I think that we will definitely be able to hit the $150,000. I did decrease ambulance service revenue and the real estate conveyance tax. And ambulance service revenue, you know, in 2013 it was $500,000, 2015 it was $425,000. It's to date $309,000. So I'm just taking the conservative approach and decreasing it $30,000. The real estate conveyance too, it tends to kind of go in line with our building permits. You know, on the good building permit years, we tend to have high real estate conveyance. We have so far to date a strong 2019, but that was really because of heirloom flats and over $300,000 payment there. So I decreased that $50,000 based on the 5-year average.
So I know there was different phase with heirloom flats. Have we adjusted for the other phase of projects that's going on there that's related to that?
So the real estate was just the sale of heirloom flats.
Oh, okay,
Yeah. So revenue is on the horizon. So some changes that we could expect based on what the budget currently is and the suggestions before the state. So proposed changes to the MBR, which would allow for a reduction if the district plans and implements school consolidation and shared service arrangements. You know, if this was the case, would be phased in, our reduction would be phased in over 3 years. Motor vehicle tax cap, it's 45 mils remains. There's a push to establish a statewide mill rate. Municipal capital grant remains in place, over 2.5% increase in expenditures. You have to report to OPM, but there is actually no direct impact. If they were to implement a revenue sharing sales tax, then we would have to pay a penalty if we passed a budget that was over 2.5%. Teachers' retirement, probably the biggest change. This is the first year that we actually have some costs that we're going to have to cover for the payment of teachers' retirement. It's in fiscal year 2020, it's $90,000, as you can see, $186,000 in 2021, and fiscal year 2022 is $282,000. So there's a penalty if the teacher salary is higher than the median, but ours is not. Ours is right in line with the state median salary of $78,000. So a couple other things: regionalization of assessment and tax collection, and school superintendents. That's picking up interest and strength. So we'll see what the future holds for that. Okay, some proposed bills that would affect us. So number 431, probably the biggest impact that we could be facing is a tax reform bill. It creates a $50,000 homestead exemption for 1 to 4 family owner occupied residents. We're not sure if that includes condos or just houses. The statewide property tax of $1 million on real estate property with homestead exemptions, and then decreasing the mill rate from 15 from our current mill rate for cars to either 15 or 19 mills. They say it's going to fund a pilot program to reimburse us, but you know, like in the past, that always tends to be on the chopping block. Exemptions also for the first $25,000 in business personal property tax. I had the assessor run some figures for us, and we could potentially lose $17.5 million if this bill actually is passed.
So that implies that there would be a significant increase in the mill rate just to deal with these items, right? Next year, next time.
Essentially, yeah.
And that's an increase assuming that we don't get the reimbursement.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Yep. A couple other bills, 475, sales tax sharing bill, which would increase the sales tax by 0.5% and just distribute the revenue in which the town was, in which the sales tax was collected. And 454, school regionalization bill that would force regionalization of districts with fewer than 40,000 students. And 57 is basically the same thing, just fewer than 2,000 students.
I think the 40,000 students was an error in the original bill. It's 40,000 population. I think they later changed that. But
did you want to discuss revenues now? Do you guys have any questions? Do you want to move on to expenditures? How do you want to move on? Okay. Okay, so town-wide 4-year comparative review. I'm just going to touch, if you look here, there are some bigger variances if you really compare the 4 years. I'm just going to touch on a few of them that I think are the biggest and would lead to probably the most questions. So if you look at the full-time, and if you look at 2017 and through 2020, you'll see the biggest jump from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19 of about $700,000. $300,000 of that is a normal bargained cost of living increase and step increases, but it should be noted that $279,000 of that difference is the police department gave back at year end of 2018. So the one thing that's hard with these comparative slides is you're taking actual expenditures of 18 and comparing them to the adopted budget of 19. So the actual budget for full-time was not very far off from the budget of 19, but the PD gave back almost $300,000 because they didn't spend it. They didn't. They had some positions that they weren't able to to fill. They were not fully staffed for patrol officers. And Public Works gave back about $100,000. They had a fleet manager position that was not filled at that time, and that was about $85,000 of that $100,000 give back. And then to go on to contractual, I think that's the next, if you look at 2017, it's $12.3 million, and in fiscal year 2020, we're going to $14.4 thousand. Within the contractual is your fixed costs, which make up the bulk of the variation. So from fiscal year 17 to 18, the fixed costs increased $356,000, and in fiscal year 18 to 19, it increased $535,000. And this is where all your essentially your MDCs housed, your payments for your pension plans, all your trash removals in there as well. So that's why there's big increases. A lot of them are outside of the town's control. And in fiscal year 1920, $686,000 of fixed costs are going up, and that's the main reason why contractual services are increasing the $700,000.
This is where the MDC is?
Yep,
So
this is where-
that's one piece of it.
Yep, it's MDC, you have your reserve for accruals, you have your trash, your pension payments, and your contributions to your 401, and your insurance and bonds, not your health insurance, all the other insurances.
Yeah.
Yep. And I was going to touch on the other. So if you look at the four-year comparative slide, it's $2.2 million in fiscal year 17. If you look, it actually went down in fiscal year 2020 by almost $200,000. Some of the other drivers, the main driver is because capital transfers is in there. So the variation that you see year after year is mainly because, like this year, the capital transfers is down $386,000, and when you compare that to fiscal year 19, the whole category is down $348,000. Utilities is also housed there. As you know, utility costs are going up, so the savings that we have in the capital transfers out is essentially offset a little bit by $40,000 in increase to utilities. That's pretty much what I was going to touch on this slide, unless anybody had any questions now, or we can wait until after. Change to the next slide. Yeah.
So Carrie, I just wanted to ask, the OPEB required ARC, and that doesn't fall under any other?
No, so we do two. Yeah, we do essentially two payments for our retiree medical. One is to pay on our liability, so that's what our future costs are going to be for employees who retire that are on the medical insurance, and one is to fund the current claims. So the ARC payment is required by our actuaries and the auditors to fund 100%, and that's going up. We're in a 10-year phase-in, so it's going to continue to go up. I think we're in year 3 of that. Annual required contribution.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Madam Mayor? A question on education, training, travel, and professional services. Have we been tracking over time how much of this money is actually being spent? What percentage of employees actually take advantage of it?
I have not, no. I know if you look at, there is some variation in 18 to 19, and you'll see that there's an increase of about $120,000, and the main reason of that is because it was taken out of a centralized account and pushed back to the actual departments for better tracking. But I do not know how many employees take advantage of that.
It's not all discretionary, David. Some of that is police mandatory training. It's training that's mandatory for the registrars of voters that they have to go to. So there's a significant amount of mandatory and certification level training, as well as discretionary attendance at conferences or meetings of that sort.
Okay, but any monies not spent would somehow show up in your accounting process, correct?
Yeah, any monies not spent would actually go back to fund balance.
Okay.
Yep.
Carrie, do you know what the year-to-date expenditure for that line item?
For combined,
Yeah, right now.
no. I would have to get, because it's a roll-up of accounts, I can get that
Okay,
for you, though, and
okay.
let you guys know.
Yeah, just to get a sense
Sure.
of, yeah, because,
Yep, and but the education, training, and travel essentially are 3 different object codes rolled into one line. Are you focused on one particular, or do you want all three together? Okay, and that does include like our tuition for, employees, the reimbursement for that too. Yep.
Expenditures for life, disability, heart, and hypertension, are those union requirements, union contracts, or are those perks?
So the heart and hypertension, and Nancy could probably better speak to this, but it was a law that has since passed, and we only have a few employees left for our police officers. So if they, had high blood pressure when they left, essentially we are responsible. So, instead of paying monthly for a certain amount of time, a lot of times we'll settle, we'll settle these claims for a benefit to the town and the employee. But
It was a state mandate for police and firefighters that if they came down with any form of heart disease, it was deemed to be attributable to their job. And there was really no substantial rebuttal that was allowed, and so the municipalities ended up paying for this. It was repealed, I think it was in 1996 it was repealed, but police and firefighters that were hired prior to that date that developed heart disease, it's presumed to be a compensable payment. We've been slowly working that down as employees have left, and we've been paying off these liabilities and whatnot. You should be aware that there's a constant pressure to reinstitute it by the public safety community and to expand it to include cancer and PTSD types of situations. If that's successful, you can probably count on a significant increase in future years, but so far it's not passed the state legislature.
Are you saying that we still have obligations under that old law?
Yes.
Oh, I thought they were gone.
Four claimants left, and no more that are eligible. So anyone else who would be eligible is no longer with the town, and there's 4 current or retired employees who get paid out.
okay, move on to the next slide. Okay, this is just a 2-year comparison by department, so it's a little bit different than the 4-year comparative review because it's by department, it's not by object code. So this kind of gives you a snapshot of what was requested last year versus what is requested in the current year. I'll go through the variances in a few more slides, but overall the town's requesting a 3.78% increase, $1.7 million over last year's budget. This is essentially the same 2-year period. It is just taking what was in the 4-year comparative review and breaking out just fiscal year 19 and 20 to give you guys another way to look at what is being requested in 2020. Okay, now we're going to go on to some major. Yeah.
Are you going to go back and talk about the changes in the department?
Yep, that's they should pretty much be all on the major cost drivers, yeah. So general government and town council increased by $87,000 or 45%. The The main drivers of this are the shared service study for $21,000. This is to better look into how the Board of Ed and the town can consolidate services and become more effective and efficient. The quick control risk assessment for $35,000. This is looking at the Board of Ed and the town and making sure that we have all the controls in place and to essentially like audit our budget transfers and things that are outside of the normal scope of our comprehensive annual financial report. Contractual services is up $23,000. And if you want to, I'm not sure if you have your budget books, but it is page 3 of the Munis report in your budget books. That's mainly, there was a change in the clerk of the council and how that was recorded and how that was treated that attributed to the increase, and also cell phone service and iPads and phones for the council, if they want, are also budgeted in this line item. Moving on, the town manager has a decrease of $73,000. This is mainly only because of the job class study that was added last year, and it was a one-time cost, so of course it was taken out this year. Town clerk increased that. It says $5,009. It should read $15,009. The main driver of this is a records retention project, and originally it was put in the budget for $23,000 as part of the town manager budget reductions. We decided to do one phase in fiscal year 20 and fund the other phase hopefully in fiscal year 2021. The finance department increased $63,000, or up 3.68%. This was mainly because of a request for a new assistant information systems and technology position. Originally, this was in the budget for a full year at $90,000, but as part of the town manager's reductions, it was reduced and with a start date of September 1st. This is partially offset by savings in technical equipment of about $23,000.
Carrie?
Yes. Yep.
Could you just elaborate a little bit on the organizational study? This was a council initiative. Mm-hmm. Could you just kind of give the viewing audience and who's here just what's the reason behind that?
Sure. The council wanted to make sure that the town was staffed accurately and that there was efficient people in positions, that there was no department that was understaffed or overstaffed, basically to make sure that the right people were in the right position to best serve the town.
And I think in addition to that was to review the current contracts that we have, and in addition to that was also to look and see where there's areas where we can improve the technology and so on to better provide the service to residents. So.
Yeah. I wasn't involved in that 100%, so it was great that you added that on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the next slide. Human resources, just a small decrease of $7,200. That was mainly because there was a retirement that was currently at a top step level, and the replacement came in at the bottom of the salary range. That led to savings. It was offset slightly by a tuition reimbursement increase of about $7,000. The town attorney increased $15,000, but that was not for the retainer of the current town attorney. That was for outside counsel. And the reason that was increased is because we have 3 current contract negotiations that have just started. We foresee them going into the next fiscal year, and therefore we suspect that we will have increased outside counsel costs. Boards and commissions decreased $1,600. Projected savings in register of voters of about $16,000, partially offset by an increase in the beautification committee. They requested an additional $5,000 this year, and elections increased about $10,000. Planning and development increased $112,000. This includes funding for 2 approved fiscal year 2019 positions that were not included in the adopted budget. That is the environmental planner and building official. Those are part-time. Part-time, correct. Yep. And also the tax increment financing district consultant and legal services of $60,000 is included in the planning and development budget this year.
And if you could explain that a little bit, so just because people see that, they hear it, and just to give them a little sense exactly what it is. And, if you could explain a little bit.
David, you want to?
This is an initiative.
Oh, yes, the Land Use and Economic Development Committee of Council has been looking into a tax increment financing project that might include one or more districts in the town. The interest in this is that this tax increment financing allows us to raise funds from the increment between what the present taxable amount is returned from a piece of property and what a future tax amount might be returned from that property after redevelopment. So it's not for every property in town, but it may be the properties in these districts, so that we can use a revenue bond to provide money for public improvements and other kinds of benefits, parks and other kinds of things as part of a development that might otherwise not take place, or the whole development might not take place without this kind of infusion of capital. It's not intended and will not come out of taxpayers' pockets, because it's meant as a revenue bond to be paid by the developer over time.
And elaborate a little bit more, Councilman Mann, the Winterberry Mall, how we could benefit from this approach.
It's an incentive that would help somebody who's sitting on the fence about undertaking a large financial project like that to move forward, realizing that the town, A, supports it, and B, is willing to help fund portions of it. Again, this could be mostly in public improvements. It could be in part parking facilities. At the same time, we're looking at other parts of the town, Blue Hills Avenue and the Granby Street, Toby Road areas, the latter of which has a great development potential. And again, it's an incentive that makes developers aware of the fact that the town wants to do business. We want to improve what we have, and it's done in a way that doesn't come out of our budget, which is,
good.
I think that's the motivation that,
Sure.
that got us all looking at that. And so this $60,000 is for attorney's fees to set up these districts, the guidelines and everything. And each one of these districts and all the guidelines have to be not only approved by council, but there'll be a public hearing so everybody can come out and understand better and get an idea of what we're thinking about. It hasn't happened yet. We're working on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, just make one quick comment on that. We're still trying to get numbers on this, but right now, the 60,000 would probably be for one district, because we've sort of been told that's a ballpark figure for this, but we don't really know until we actually start doing it, and we hope there's some economies of scale and doing several at once, that it would, either be a lower cost or make the marginal cost of doing the next one a lot lower.
One more point. I think for the people out in the audience who are hearing some of the new state actions that will likely take more money away from the municipality and put more pressure on taxpayers to pay just the basic upkeep and maintenance of the municipality, it behooves us to try and find some ways that we can keep our municipality moving forward. And this is one that seriously has that potential, and that's why we're spending time looking at it. And hopefully we'll be having something more to say to the public in the next couple of months.
Great. Okay, on to the next cost drivers. So the police department, as you see, increased only $27,000 or 0.34%. This is mainly because of they'll be full staffed, which is good because overtime therefore will decrease. As you can see, there's a request for a new emergency management and medical service coordinator. This is a civilian position. It is not an officer position, and it's offset partially by reducing the police cadet program from 2 down to 1. We've been unsuccessful at filling the second position. We have one over there now. The chief can speak to better, but I've heard rave reviews on the cadet that we have now. Overtime savings totaling over 30% because we're fully staffed, and savings of $20,000 for the bloodborne pathogen line item. Public Works, increase of $43,000. Some cost drivers of that is new GPS software, gas and diesel fuel increased about $13,000, and overtime increased $12,000 based on a 5-year trend. Yep.
Excuse me for asking you to go back a sec to the emergency medical.
Yep.
We've been hearing there's a difficulty in securing volunteers to keep this vital service going. It's one of the few left in the state that are done on a volunteer basis, and I think everybody's excited about it. However, the fact that it is having difficulty maintaining the workforce poses a problem.
Yeah.
I did look in the budget, and I thought I saw $450,000 of income from this process to the town. I don't know whether or not that's a net negative or a net positive when you figure in the cost of the service and equipment and housing and so forth, and wonder whether or not at some point we need to have a look-see as what, maybe a transition.
What the future is.
I think we need to think about that because I don't know for sure whether it's paying for itself right now or not.
Yeah, I wouldn't unless I actually did a thorough review, because there's a few factors that we'd need to take into consideration. But I can look further into that and kind of give you a net figure, like revenue compared to actual expenditures for that service.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, facilities increased $43,000. That's mainly increases in the Public Works Headquarters, Police, Prosser, and Wittenberry Library. The Health Department increased $33,000, and that's based on the budget that we received from West Hartford Bloomfield Health District. Senior Services had a small increase of about $16,000. They're proposing class instructor increase of $5,000. And increase in full and part-time minibus staff for contractual step increases. We have the minibus, a lot of our drivers are new, so therefore they are both part-time and full-time are part of the Teamsters Union, and therefore they're receiving step increases. So fixed costs is the majority of the town's increase. As you can see, out of $1.7 million, 1.2 of that is under fixed cost. The OPEB ARC payment, annual required contribution payment, increased $412,000. We have the MDC payment increasing $254,000. Medical claims is up about $250,000. Our reserve for accruals is $290,000, and we increased our 401 contribution to up $75,000.
Carrie,
Yes, yep.
can we, just going back, and we can look at this further, but I think you mentioned that the ARC payment for OPEB, we have an increasing schedule on that?
Yes.
And it's going to increase, we're in the third or fourth year. What is it going to get up to its maximum?
Over $3 million. I think it's $3.1 million
Wow.
will be our annual contribution going forward.
And the reason it wasn't just calculated as a level contribution from the time it started was because
of the tax burden, it would, I mean, if
it would be too, it's trying to phase it in.
Yeah, it's trying, to create the least amount of burden, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. A cap on your accruals, yes. All the labor negotiations have caps on their accruals. We only pay out for sick time for one of the current unions. All other unions are no longer paying out for sick time. It's 2 times your annual accrual for vacation. And perfect attendance, you have, I believe it's 160 hours, and your comp time is anywhere from, I believe, 100 hours to 160 hours, depending on your work shift. It might be even 200 for some of the sergeants over at the PD, because it's based on hours in a day.
So those aren't capped by us, those are capped by contract?
By contract, correct. Yep, yeah.
Okay.
The miscellaneous costs decreased $50,000. So last year, we, council initiative, we increased the miscellaneous costs to fund $100,000 for a STEM program. We, because we weren't sure if we were going to continue the program, continue the funding, we decided to roll that up into council contingency, but as part of the town manager's reductions, we reduced the $100,000 to $50,000. So that's why you'll see the decrease of $50,000 for miscellaneous costs.
So just to, Deputy Mayor, I know that the STEM program is still something that's viable and still something that the council would like to see continued. I know that the Leisure Services is doing some things with STEM out of their budget, and we're hoping to be able to support them for that STEAM program that they're doing after school, and they're going to be incorporating some of that in their summer program. So computers, programs, things like that is all a part of the STEM initiative for the town of Bloomfield. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. When they add STEAM, they add art to that, so.
Great.
Have we considered making that part of the Board of Ed budget?
It was a consideration in the beginning because the Board of Ed did not take opportunity with that. It's now going to help the Leisure Services do their program.
That was, I believe, the original thinking was that we were going to match the Board of Ed, we were going to assist their program, and the town was going to give $100,000, but that's...
And I just want to add to that, I think it's important during the summer to have various activities for our young people within the town, so I think it's a great initiative to have.
On to our last slide of major cost drivers. Debt service increased $614,505. As you know, in January of 2019, we went out for $12 million of bonds and $7 million of bands to fund the first portion of the 2 building projects for 330 Park and the Public Works renovations. This increase is going to be partially offset, about half, $321,000, by an assignment of fund balance that's specific to debt service. So the net impact to the taxpayers is only going to be 5% or less than $300,000. Capital transfers out decreased $386,000. We still have 21 projects, and we do have over $2 million in other funding sources that are going to help support our capital projects. And just to note slight changes in the below departments, leisure, library, and social. Leisure and social increased $2,600 for leisure, $1,600 for social, and library actually decreased about $13,000. Okay. Yep.
Just back on a couple pages on page 13. I just wondered about the health department increase. Do you know what that's attributable to? Is it due to more enforcement by the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District?
I may be able to help. It does include the hiring of a part-time code enforcement officer that would be for both West Hartford but also Bloomfield. Bloomfield led the drive for that, and West Hartford thought they could use it as well. So that's what the major part of that increase in the health district budget is.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. The next slide is capital projects. We can either go on to capital projects, or if you guys have any questions on the general fund expenses outside of capital projects transfers, I can take them now. Go on? Okay. Nancy's going to discuss the town-wide capital.
Good evening. These for short people. Good evening, I'm Nancy Haynes. I'm the Purchasing and Risk Manager, and one of my other duties is also overseeing the capital improvement process and several of the larger projects. As you know, I oversee the building committees and work with them for the 2 bonded projects at 330 Park. and also the Public Works project. But we're not here to talk about those right now unless you have questions about them that I can answer. Although the mayor may be in a better position to answer. She just had a tour of the new facility earlier this afternoon.
So since you brought that up, let me take liberty. I had an opportunity to tour the building today, and I can say the building is going to be amazing. I am so very proud of what we are creating, the new Human Services building. The building committee, the construction manager, the architects, they have all done a wonderful job, and I believe that once the building is fully complete, the town will be very, very proud of what we have. So I did say it today on behalf of the council, right, Nancy? I did say it on behalf of the council. Thank you to everyone that's investing their time, energy, and attention to this building. It's spectacular. We have a Gone with the Wind staircase. You have to see it for yourselves. But, I mean, really, this is going to be something noteworthy, something that we can noise abroad. So thank you again, Nancy, and please just reiterate it to everyone that I did say it in public.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You gave quite the nice speech, and it was very encouraging to the group of volunteers, much like yourself. You know that these are thankless jobs sometimes that you spend a lot of hours on and a lot of time for the building committee. It meant a lot to them to hear that. And just so the rest of you know, I mean, there'll be more information as it comes out, but right now they're looking at about an early June opening of the new building. Middle of June, they'll start demolition on the existing building and the field reconstruction. So it's moving right along.
1 second, Nancy.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, could you just schedule a tour for the council? Because just so everyone will know, this is just not something that you did. This was the building committee.
No, she's the liaison to the building committee, which is why she.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And this was set up by I was just in.
It was.
But Nancy will make sure that.
I will set up one for the
Awesome.
council.
Thank you
so very much.
It's good for clarity with these things. Thank you.
All right. So I'm not going to speak in detail about all of the capital projects because as part of your process, you'll be having the individual department directors who will be speaking in more detail than I'll be able to. I just want to go over briefly what each one was. As you know, there's a total of almost $3.1 million in capital projects funded from a variety of sources. $900,000 of it is from the town's general fund budget. There's also the $125,000 in LoCIP funding, the municipal capital grant, which is $1.7 million, and then there's also $300,000 that are in other projects that current projects that won't be needed that we're going to be transferring to offset some of the costs in these projects. So there's 21 projects. I don't know what happened to this. There we go. As you can see, the largest one is the road improvements. We've been funding this fairly aggressively over the past several years, and this will fund a variety of paving or resurfacing programs. Right now, we're looking at doing milling and overlays and reclamations. The town does have a consultant who actually rates our roads, believe it or not. And they give the recommendation on which roads would be most likely to be in need of repair or replacement. So this year, we're looking at Joyce Street, Beatrice Avenue, Kings Highway, Englewood Avenue, Rockwell, Norman, Pine Grove, Daniel Boulevard, May Lane, Ledyard, and Glenwood. That was 2 months ago what we're looking at. I mean, those could change, but that was the plan going into the budget.
Just to make a comment on this, that this really does not, $1.1 million does not keep us up. We really should be spending more. For years, it's been over $1 million a year to keep pace. So it's something we ought to be aware of, that we are underspending in doing this. If we really wanted to keep the roads in good condition, we should be spending more money.
The next item that we have would be for the town-wide property reval. This is the second year of funding for the reval, and this includes not only the reval company, which has started, we have a part-time clerical position, we did a flyover with some mapping, there's some GIS updating that will be done, and a few upgrades to our software, our current software that we use, Envision, and also there is a specialty property appraisals that fall under this category. So this is the second and final year that you'll see this particular item on the capital.
Just a quick question. Just a quick question. I think this goes through the finance area. What area does this, when will we hear about this capital project in detail?
During the finance.
Into finance,
yes,
you're right.
Because the assessor's office
So
is
I
under
guess
that.
one question just to address when that happens is, what happens if we don't fund all of this? I mean, this would seem to be something that has to be done. So are there reductions that could be made in it? So we don't need to answer that tonight, but I think that's a question that we need to answer.
I think, Kevin, that in many cases, we already have contracts in place to carry out the work that Nancy's outlined. It's just that we're funding it pretty much in line with the schedule for the work that has to be done. As you know, the state of Connecticut requires that we do a revaluation every 5 years anyway. I think what we're doing with this is refining our software and GIS applications and whatnot go with it. As everybody knows, the world is moving to a digitalized platform on so many things, and so the last time we did this 5 years ago, we were upgrading from 2009. Now we're upgrading from 2014 to 2019. So most of these, the contracts are in place. It's just being funded over 3 years. A year from now, you'll see, I think it's $25,000 in there to complete the work.
And that was really sort of the essence of my question, how much of this was already determined and therefore not something really
It's not
negotiable, if you will.
Right, exactly.
Which is fine. Thank you.
The next item on there is Public Works heavy equipment. This will fund a plow truck. The next one is, Philly Park restoration. We're making progress, as many people have seen at Philly Park. Some probably not as quickly as you would like it, I admit. But in order, if we were to do that, there would have to be other things that wouldn't get done. But this $150,000 would complete the natural playground and a portion of the West Side Trail system. And Jonathan can speak in more detail, but I see the deputy mayor looked like he had a question. So.
Well, I guess I'll wait for John. I was just trying to figure out exactly what's the estimated timeline for that project to be completed. Just if I was home watching, I would want to know,
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I will say, in all fairness, the weather this year has been very, very difficult for several of our projects, including, and it's impacted the most, obviously, 330 Park and Philly Park, because of the amount of moisture. It's just been an abnormal rain year, so that has had a negative impact on schedules for both projects. And there are other things, I'm sure, that Jonathan can speak in more detail, but I do know that has had a...
But 330 Park continues to be on plan. Yeah. Philly, on the other hand, they continue to delay it, and I've asked, in one of our meetings, we did ask Jose or maybe it was Jonathan, to give us the realistic date, because every time they put a date, they don't meet it. So just tell us the date that it will be done and make it real.
I'll bring that back to him so that when he does his presentation, they'll be prepared to discuss that. The next one is the water splash pad. I have to say, as the town's risk manager, this one is near and dear to my heart. This will replace the toddler pool, and I am no fan of pools from a risk perspective, especially when I'm thinking of the little ones. So the splash pad would replace that. There is current money available, but we had thought that town was going to be getting a grant to complete it for this year, and that grant fell through, so this would supplement the existing funds that were approved last year and allow the town to do the splash pad. Also, the splash pad, it was a little bit more than we had initially anticipated because the design that is preferred is one where the water recirculates rather than wasting the water, so that added a little cost to it. Next is Farmington River Park. Oh, did I miss? I'm sorry. That is number 6. Oh, I'm sorry, I was going from here.
But the replacement, yeah.
Replacement page. Oh, okay. Well.
I didn't see the replacement page.
So can I ask a question? And I think we had asked about it already. Is this extra money beyond what the correct money was, or is this leftovers from the correct money?
There is still $120,000 left of the correct money.
So this is extra money that's being used?
Yes. The whole project is $540,000, $526,000, and then you pull out the correct money, which is $120,000 that's left. So I think it's like 406 is what the town would need to fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this request, which is only for $106,000, would cover the demolition of...
Oh, no, that's incorrect. This 106 was this additional. We're going to use the 120 to do the stuff that you're talking about. This was just added, but we need to remove this, the 106.
We need to move it out a year.
Correct.
Well, we will
Correct.
move it out during the deliberations and discussions.
Correct.
So go ahead and keep on doing your thing.
Okay, well, I'll move on to the next one then, which is the golf course. The money that's in here will be used I'm sorry. I wish we'd gone down what was in the list. It would have been a lot easier. That's how I had all of my notes prepared. The bridge and culverts. There have been several requests for specific areas in town, as well as a pot of money to be set aside for things that come up. For instance, we just had one that we did on West Newberry Road. So there's about 50,000 of the request had been for those types of things, but it's also competing with 3 other drainage issues in town that we've had complaints about: Hoskins Road, Daniel Boulevard, and Alexander Road. Also Florence Street sidewalk and the underdrain project, so that's been an area too.
Is the Mountain Road culvert in front of the sawmill off the list now? We've had up to $500,000 for that in the past.
Right, that was a local bridge program effort to replace the bridge on Mountain Avenue. There were some hydrological issues with that between the state engineering department that would have raised that up to a much higher level, so that's kind of under appeal at the moment. We're trying to get it reduced back down, but there are funds still available for that.
And we have not planned on transferring any of those funds out to expend them.
Yeah, the original project total was around $660,000. The state was funding $330,000 of that, and the town was funding the other 50% of it, which is still technically there.
So with the varying competing projects, in all likelihood, if only $100,000 was available, it would probably be used towards the Hoskin Roads culvert, but that has not been finalized yet. Now we have Wittenberry Hills Golf Course. And in that is $95,000. That would go to cover a portion of the dresser. The right name for it? Field dresser, the golfers here. Hold on.
Yeah, that one is, 70,000 of that is for the potential demolition of the neighboring property, and the balance is for...
Top dresser.
Cartway and pathway...
The top dresser,
Right.
which is a piece of machinery that dresses the top, I guess. It's a portion of it. It won't cover all of it for the top dresser. 70,000 was to demo the adjacent property should the town purchase it. Next is an additional $80,000 to complete the Parks Complex, next we have the IT improvements. Scott Charlo will be here when Finance does their budget, but it's a variety of technological things that most of us probably don't even know what they mean, but I will tell you what they are. Maybe I won't. I don't know where that page went to. There was a fiber ring upgrade. Oh, I don't have that. Yeah, data encryption. Network security, I think that was 30,000. And there was one other large one.
Wireless controller upgrade, 12,000.
Yeah. If you want to know what those are, Scott can tell you, because all I know is if it keeps our data safe, I'm all for it. Now we get to the park complex tennis courts. The existing tennis courts at the school, up in the whole 330 Park complex, are being repurposed. They'll go from 6 courts to 5 courts. We already have a substantial amount of money in place already, but the $80,000 will be needed to complete it. Dave Malesko tells me that they're close to getting the plans and specs and hope to be able to bid that out sometime later this spring or early summer, and the work can be done this summer. The neighborhood tennis court removal is an initiative that would be done by Public Works.
Excuse me, do you know how many tennis courts we're talking about?
6, I believe.
Do you know where they're located?
I do. Senate Farms would be a removal with the tennis court and be replaced with the half basketball court. Reservoir 3 would be removal of all the tennis courts. Castle would also be the removal of tennis courts, and we would repair the tennis courts at Maplewood and remove the tennis courts at Revere Drive. And these were all in the Parks Master Plan. So these were planned for in the Parks Master Plan, and this would go towards achieving the goal that was in the plan. 13A and 13B is the board and the town share of the replacement of the artificial turf athletic field at the high school. As you're probably aware, there's an agreement that each side funds it so that it can be replaced. I think the estimated replacement cost when we get there is between $800,000 and $1 million. And I think that is, no, that's not. There, as part of that agreement, the town youth leagues, I think, were able to get some usage of the artificial turf field in exchange for that.
So why do we have the Board of Ed's share in that?
Well, the Board of Ed makes their capital requests to the town like any other department, and that was one of their capital requests. That was one of the few that was funded. Number 14 is the conversion of the Board of Ed financial systems. That is Munis. This is the second year of funding. This particular portion of it would cover the data conversion and training. The actual software cost of this was already absorbed in the current year budget, and this would complete the conversion.
Is there a target date for that to be completed?
Yeah, the Board of Ed is thinking this, July 1st, 2020.
Okay, next we have the Pershing Park revitalization plan, and that would cover the playground and the basketball court. The playground there is no longer usable, and I think it was inspected a year or two ago and not found to be wanting, so this would cover the replacement and the basketball court.
And do you have a date for that?
No. And none of this money is available till July 1st, so it wouldn't happen until after July 1st.
Okay, and do you know how long it would take to do that?
I don't, but we can ask Dave when Dave Malesko would be overseeing that. Next is the town green renovation. $50,000 is budgeted for that, and that would cover the movement of some of the monuments in addition to a few of them to replace. They would either replace or relocate the existing monuments to create a monument walk along the east side of the green and complete some other minor improvements.
It would also, I think, Nancy, include the construction of a driveway for the portable stage to be able to be transported onto the town green across from the Congregational Church.
Then we've also budgeted for $50,000 to get the library back, the library project up and going again. We did have there is an architect that the town had retained. Obviously, you can't do any more planning in deciding if you want to move forward with it unless you have some good estimates. So, can't get the estimates unless you have the architect. So that's what that would go to cover.
Nancy, you're talking about Prosser Library?
Yes.
Has there been any consideration with regard to the Wintonberry Library, the library on the other side of town?
When we did it before, no, there was not. You mean to close it or to renovate it?
To renovate it. We have a one library system in the town of Bloomfield, right? So would we consider renovating both libraries?
The original plan that was moving forward in 2016 envisioned only Prosser Library because it was constrained by size and did not include anything for the branch library on Blue Hills.
We already did the branch library.
Certainly, that's something a building committee can look at. Back in 2016, the cost to either build a brand-new library or renovate the existing library was anywhere from $19 to $21 million. So my guess is that anything that would include the space over there would only add to that. Number 18 on the sidewalk repair and replacement, that's used, it's not specific to any particular sidewalk anywhere in town, but that is when Public Works does do some upgrades and improvements as needed in specific areas. Number 19, this is a new project. It says general park maintenance, but it's really refreshing and upgrade, and it would cover only capital items. It does not cover, and it would not cover those like a playscape, but it would include improvements such as fencing. In some of our parks, there's a lack of fencing, or the fencing needs to be replaced. There might be some regrading that needs to be done, but it wouldn't include any of the leisure services types of things, but it would really be an effort to upgrade the, maybe a trail system, or, or a fence.
Does that exclude labor as well? You said capital costs.
We would essentially contract that. We wouldn't do it ourselves. We would hire somebody to replace a fence.
Oh, it's not DPW?
No. The Public Works also has money in their budget to cover some of the park improvements or expenses such as general maintenance. Those are not things that typically would go into a capital budget.
So where will we see, is this a leisure who requested this?
This one was from Public Works.
This is from Public Works?
Correct.
Okay, so when they come in, they can talk about how they,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Number 21, $30,000 for the Tungus sidewalk extension. That would be extending the sidewalk on Tungus Avenue on the east side, from Philly Park up to the Geisler's Plaza light.
Yes, we have a state grant for that for $266,000. We're required to have a match for that, so this $30,000 is the town's match to get the $266 to build the sidewalk up to Geisler's.
Is there another sidewalk, the one going to the high school?
The Crestview one? That's in an out year of that's in the 5-year plan, but it's not funded for next year.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And then the last item would be the demolition of the Riley Lumber Building. In anticipation of, number one, either the library project going forward at some point, but also it will be soon empty. Right now, we're leasing the space to a utility, but we do have concerns that it would become an attractive nuisance. So we thought we would take it down before someone did it for us.
Excuse me, I'd like to make a comment on this one. I know it's the smallest item on the budget, but I know it's maybe necessary for the library. My thought is that it has a lot of psychic value to the people in town. It's been there for a long time, it has visibility, much more attractive than looking at a vacant lot. And it also has other potential. I mean, it could be used for the farmer's market, it could be used for flea markets, until the building is totally determined as totally not safe for human occupancy, because it's just a shell of a building. I would hope we don't rush through to demolish it until we know that, A, we're going to have a new library, and B, that the building is totally not worth the effort.
The only other thing I would add is that building is in a floodplain, and it's difficult to get insurance for people who...
Well, if it's flooded or whatever, then we demolish it. I don't see what this big deal is.
The brook will take it.
We don't need it.
Are there any other questions on either the 5-year plan that we didn't address? We just thought we would focus on next year's budget, but I'll take your other questions and comments back to the department so that they're prepared to speak to them. Yes?
Nancy, I just had a question about projects that are currently in progress that are not part of 1920. Will we just get a listing of, projects that are currently in progress that they're not part of this budget year, but are there any excess funds in those projects that would be transferring over?
There's $300,000, if this is $300,000 of projects that will be, aren't needed in current projects that will be used to fund this 2020.
Okay, so are we going to get that list of those projects that are?
Well, the $300,000 comes from two projects. It comes from the Granby Street repaving and drainage project, which came in under bid from where we did, and also, as you may remember, we had money budgeted to start the design work on the Lower Blue Hills Avenue streetscape project, and we received word from the Capital Region Council of Governments that the town's been awarded an $800,000 grant to undertake that project. So we were able to take money from both of those projects and apply them towards the proposed capital budget listing.
Are there any other specific projects that are ongoing now that you would like to have addressed?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of other projects that I know we've discussed in prior years or in prior meetings. For example, the Mountain Avenue sidewalk, that has been something that's been on our list for as long as I can remember it. We're still not complete with the bike trail, the greenway. No, we're still not complete with, there were some things I thought in the town hall, were we going to replace a boiler? Or was that already done?
We did the boiler at the end of last summer. The chiller and the floor in that room are actually in out years of the 5-year plan. They have to be done together, and that's rather, I want to say that's over $500,000 to do that. So that's essentially, a third of what we'd be spending, so.
You should see in the information that's been provided to you in the budget book, a list of capital projects that were requested but were not recommended at this point. Okay. So Patrick, some of the ones you're talking about are in that listing.
Okay.
We can provide you with listings from prior capital budgets if you want to. And I think when Jonathan Thiese's in, the town engineer, he's the one that's monitoring and managing really the Greenway and a number of these other projects.
Okay.
That we can get a more in-depth analysis and status on when he comes in, so.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was thinking is if we do have a lot of open projects from prior fiscal years that are either stalled or for whatever reason things have changed and we no longer need to complete the project, do we have any money then from those projects if we were to shut them down? Can that money be brought over and used for other things? So I don't know. I mean, I know we continue with a lot of projects, but some of them just seem like they go on, or they never come to conclusion.
We'll take another look at any of the remaining balances. We went through those pretty carefully when we were constructing this budget, but it's always worth another look anyways.
Yeah, I think
and actually, like right now, though, is when we really start up again, like with the street work, sidewalk work. I think we're getting ready to do the police department generator, so some of the
That's another
things-
one. The signage. I think there was additional work for signage in the town. Wayfinding and park signs. Okay. Okay, it might be in their budget?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think that's going to be in their budget. because
There's
I know
still
that-
money in the existing capital budget to finish that.
Right, because I know that they wanted to cut down some of the posts and probably flip the signs going different directions, so I know that they're probably going to bring that up as well.
Okay, thank you.
Can we get I don't know if Phil has an update. What is the status of the Mountain Avenue sidewalk? Because I know, to Councilor Di Lorenzo's point, that has been on the list for a long time.
Yes, it has, and it needs to get done, and I think anybody who travels Mountain Avenue during the winter when there's snow shelves there and you get pedestrians, the money is in place. The issue is getting slope rights from the state of Connecticut Department of Transportation, where we have to push the slopes back, okay? But I can get you a more up-to-date, status after I talk with Jonathan. But the money is there to fund it, and the design work, as I understand, it's all completed, and we're in literally the right-of-way or last part of the right-of-way, which is the slope rights from the state of Connecticut.
I also would like to comment on that we have, when we're putting a sidewalk extension in, like the one at Philly Park that's in the budget, that we ought to consider whether we might want to make that part of the East Coast Greenway. There's some talk of coming it, so it almost seems that like if you're putting a sidewalk in, that maybe it could be part of the Greenway and save us some money by having both things accomplished with the same. And the same would go for that other sidewalk too, that goes to the high school. But I guess that's next year anyway. That may be one of the reasons it was put off.
Yeah, the state has, just a sidebar a little bit on that project, the state has plans to put a traffic signal in at the intersection of Park and Crestview and they did not include sidewalks in that. That wasn't part of their scope. So that we have a capital budget item in the capital budget that was going to be funded this coming year, which because of delays in the state getting their project ready, approved, and funded, it'll be a year from now before that one goes in the capital budget. But that was, I think, about $175,000 to complete a sidewalk along the east side of Crestview, so that the high school students can walk down.
To the traffic light.
Right.
Well, I just wanted to add something for consideration. The intersection of Cottage Grove Road where Granby Street, School Street, that huge intersection, there's been a lot of concern with regard to pedestrians trying to get across that street. And I've received phone calls and emails from citizens saying, can you get the Department of Transportation to do something to either prolong the walk so that, you know, these guys can walk across the street, especially folks who have walkers or canes or whatever. And I did communicate that about 3 months ago with State Rep Bobby Gibson, and I don't know what the reasoning is, but the state said that they couldn't do anything, and I'm wondering is that something that you'd be able to take a look at to say, hey, you know, we do have an issue. A couple of people contacted me and said that they were almost hit because they were walking across, and as they were walking across, the light changed and the cars took off. So maybe that's something that we can look into in that area.
Follow up.
Madam Mayor, if a second, it's not for you, Nancy, it's for either Phil or Carrie. Could you, I should have said this at the beginning, so please forgive me, could you walk us through the budget process of who was involved in the various department collaboration? In addition to that, I know there were some initiatives from the Finance Committee that came out with the analysis. I think this is a new process, and if you could just explain that a little bit more to the full council, the reason behind it with comparative year over year and so on.
Well, I think the budget process really starts in the August to September time frame prior to the next fiscal year. About the only time when we're not really dealing with budgets is during the summer months. So guidance is put out to the department heads usually in early fall with a schedule. The council approves the budget schedule going forward for the subsequent fiscal year, which starts July 1st. Municipalities generally operate on a mid-calendar fiscal year. And I think this year the Finance Subcommittee took some interest in trying to streamline the presentation process and to also make it more transparent. And so what you're seeing tonight is a combination of summarized information that is being displayed on two large widescreen digital screens here, which we have not had in the past, and which are fed into the BATV system. And I think it affords the public a great deal more insight, not only into the budget, but also into the various projects and effort that go into it. What happens with the budget schedule is that the town departments are required to submit their capital budget proposals usually by December. We start reviewing those shortly thereafter. The operational budgets have to be submitted to the town manager's office usually by January after the holiday season. We then meet individually with each department over their capital improvement requests so we understand better exactly what's being requested and why. We do the same thing with the operational budgets. That takes a longer period of time because they're more detailed and there's a lot more information available, and obviously the costs are often higher. So those meetings are scheduled. We meet with the departments on both capital and operating budgets, and then we start putting them together and combining them, usually in the late January and February timeframes. At the same time, budgets are not just expenditures, as we all know, they're revenues. So you start to look at the revenue processes. The assessor is required to file his grand list as of the previous October on January 31st, and that has to be filed with the state of Connecticut. We then have some indication of where the property changes have occurred in town over the prior year, and we discussed them a little bit earlier this evening in terms of residential property, automobiles, and personal property. And so we then have a figure on property changes, the grand list growth increase. I think one of the biggest issues every year is what the state of Connecticut is going to do based upon their own budgetary issues. And we're at that point right now. And so the budget process is a living process. We're getting new information in all the time. You have to adjust things both on the revenue side and on the expenditure side as new information comes in. We try to do the best in estimating things. And then we start moving into where the town manager has a compilation at this point, usually at the end of February, beginning of March. And we then have to go through the logistics of putting all of this together in a binder or in a presentation, as you see part of it this evening, and that's given to the town council. So the manager proposes, and then the town council disposes as to what they want to do. And so these series of meetings that we're having over the next 3 to 4 weeks are really to get the town council really briefed on both the capital and operating budgets, to incorporate new information that we may have come in during that period of time. And then the council has to make some pretty tough decisions as to what they want to propose to the community as the budget for the forthcoming fiscal year. On a corollary to this, on a parallel path, is also the Board of Education process. And the Board of Education is roughly half of our budget. If you broke out the debt service and some of the other fixed costs that Carrie Rowley talked about earlier, the portion that's attributed to the Board of Education would probably be in the 60-65% range of the total, in our case, what we're talking about today, $95 million. So the Board of Ed goes through their process, and they adopt the budget, and they're required to get that budget over to the town side of the street, that's the town manager's office, and the town council, by the end of February, beginning of March, in the same time frame. And as all of you know, or most of you know, we had our presentation with the Board of Education this past Thursday. We also had an overview by the town manager last Thursday, and tonight we're starting to get down into the real details of what's in the budget. And so going forward, over the next 3 to 4 weeks, we have a series of meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They'll be broadcast over BATV, and obviously anybody's welcome to attend them here at the Town Hall in the council chambers. Then we come down, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, to the council having to make a decision. And once the council's made that decision, we have to go ahead and have a public hearing. That's tentatively scheduled for the first week in April. And then the big decision comes on the budget in May. Under our town charter, the town council adopts the budget, or we have our annual town and budget meeting. This year, it's on the first Monday in May. This year, it's May 6th. And that's held at 7 p.m. at the high school auditorium, Bloomfield High School. And that's where the council will hear public comment and also make a decision on the budget, which then goes into effect July 1st. So that's kind of a broad overview of the process and some of the milestones and decision points that we have ahead of us.
I would just want to, I would just like to add, that's really good information for those in the audience and for those who are at home to understand the process. I would like to add that on this coming Thursday, boards and agencies, leisure services, senior services, social and youth services will be presenting their budget. On the 26th, facilities and public works. On the 28th, public safety. And as Phil said, we'll be having our public hearing on the 2nd, along with planning, library, fixed charges, general government, and administration. So the process is extremely open, and we're asking everyone to be a part of the process, because once we deliberate and once we decide whatever is disposed of, whatever was proposed, it will affect you. It's going to affect your tax rate. It's going to affect the services that we can provide as a town. It's going to affect the Board of Education, our educational services. So everything that's being done here, it's taking a lot of time before this time when everyone was preparing, during this time when everyone is presenting, and after this time when everyone will be deliberating. It's important that we're all at the table to hear what's going on, to understand what's going on, to have input in what's going on, so that when the decisions are made, we can all feel that we've made the best fiscal decision, not for individuals, but for us together as a town. So thank you so very much for that clarification. I thought that was absolutely wonderful. For those who are in the audience, thank you. For those who are watching on TV, thank you. I know that Howard will make sure that these play over for the next few weeks so that we can all get up to speed. So I know that we just interrupted you, Nancy. You're done?
I'm done.
Okay. So a lot of information, great overview. Phil?
I don't really have anything to add unless there's some questions, specific or general.
So I think probably the specific questions will be able to be asked of the department heads, because they would have all the information. And as Phil says, it's a living, breathing document. It changes. When does, and that might be a question that you can't answer, when are we proposed to get the final budget from the state, do you know?
Generally, that occurs in May, and it's usually after our town meeting, so we never know the final figure. I mean, generally, we have a good idea of where things are heading, but it's been known to change, particularly in the last couple, 3 years, when the state and has had financial difficulties. But we should have a good read by May.
So by the time we pass the budget, you think we'll be good?
Yeah, I think we've made some fairly good, I think, assumptions at this point.
Excellent. So thank you once again. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for coming out. Sharon?
Just a reminder that public safety on the 28th will not be televised because of room conflict.
Okay.
So they will have to come out to see public safety.
You will have to come out to see public safety. Also, next week, so just for the listening audience, we're going to be saying it quite often because we do want public participation. On the 29th, we will have an opportunity to meet 2 candidates for town council. I'm sorry, for town manager. So sorry. There's 2 candidates that will be coming to us for town manager starting at 7 p.m. They will be here. Each of them will make a presentation. You will get an opportunity to interact with them. Once again, please come out, be a part of the process. Let your voice be heard. Get to know the individuals, and, we'll chug on from there. Thank you for your time. Good evening. Do we need motions and stuff? Okay. No.